I had hoped to harvest our largest, ripest Sophie's Choice tomato on camera today, but someone, I don't know who, made off with the tomato from our front yard garden before I had the chance to. This tomato was part of our quest to begin harvesting ripe tomatoes from the garden before the end of June. Today I'll share the results of that quest, as well as share my thoughts on growing vegetables in an open front yard garden. Let's start with our quest to begin harvesting ripe tomatoes before the end of June. In the past, we only grew indeterminate varieties here in the backyard garden, and we usually started harvesting tomatoes in mid to late July. But this year we decided to also grow two early season determinate varieties, Sophie's Choice and Glacier. Both varieties do well in cool climates, and they're supposed to mature in less than 60 days. So in hopes of a harvest before the end of June, we started a number of these tomatoes in the grow room in March and transplanted them into the front yard garden in May. We chose the front yard garden because it gets a lot more sun than the backyard. Out of curiosity, we also planted some under double cover in the hoop house on April 1st to see how they'd do compared to the tomatoes started in the grow room. The first result I can share is that the tomatoes started outside haven't done nearly as well as those started in the grow room. The plants are healthy, but it'll be weeks before we harvest tomatoes from them, and we're already harvesting tomatoes from the plants started in the grow room. This isn't much of a surprise because we didn't have very good tomato growing weather this spring. April was much too cold and cloudy to warm the soil enough to get tomatoes off to a good start, even under double cover. And May wasn't much better. We had unseasonably cold temperatures in the middle of the month and a lot of overcast, rainy days. Rain is great for the garden overall, but it doesn't help plants under cover. What the tomatoes really needed was sun, and they didn't get much of that in May. Even so, we'll continue to start some of our tomatoes early outside under cover in the future. This is our third year doing so, and we've had much better results in the past 2 years when the weather was more cooperative. And it's fine that the tomatoes started outside are a little bit behind. This way we have more of a succession of harvests instead of having to harvest all of the tomatoes at the same time. So when did we harvest our first ripe tomato? July 2nd. We didn't quite make our goal of harvesting before the end of June, but we came very close. And we were surprised which tomato ripened first for two reasons. First, it was in the backyard garden in an area that gets only 5 to 6 hours of sun a day instead of the much sunnier front yard garden. And second, it wasn't one of our early season determinate tomatoes that ripened first. It was an indeterminate honey drop cherry tomato. This is the third year we've grown this variety, and it's one of the sweetest, best tasting cherry tomatoes that we grow. In fact, last night I harvested all of our ripe tomatoes for dinner. But here's a video from last summer to give you a better idea of what the tomatoes look like. In addition to ripening early, these tomatoes produce well late into the season, and they've been one of our more disease-resistant tomatoes. The second tomato to ripen was one of our early season determinate varieties, this Glacier tomato. But once again, we were surprised that it was one in the backyard garden and not in the front yard. These Glacier tomatoes were ready to harvest on July 8th. Though some of our early season tomatoes are planted in raised beds, most, like this one, are in 7-gallon grow bags. Though early season tomatoes aren't always known for their flavor, we really enjoyed these Glacier tomatoes, and they tasted much better than store-bought tomatoes that we also added to the same dish. Now to the case of the stolen tomato. We anxiously awaited the harvest of our largest, ripest Sophie's Choice tomato, which you can see here on the left. Unfortunately, the morning after I shot this video, I found that the tomato was gone. Though it's possible that an animal took the tomato, it wasn't quite ripe and wasn't ready to fall off the plant, so it took a little bit of manual dexterity to remove it cleanly. And my guess is that whoever took it had opposable thumbs. Though we were a little disappointed to lose this particular tomato after all the anticipation, this is the first time we've ever noticed any crops missing from our front yard garden, and we've been growing out there for a number of years now. And we really don't mind that much if someone occasionally helps themselves to a tomato from the front yard, and we certainly wouldn't mind if they were hungry. So we don't plan on making any major changes now, except to move tomatoes that are in grow bags a little further away from the sidewalk. The tomato that went missing was in a grow bag right next to the sidewalk, and that might have been too much of a temptation. In general, I think tomatoes are the most tempting crop for people to pick. No one's ever touched our kale or Swiss chard. And to be on the safe side, I harvested the rest of the tomatoes that were almost ripe. Though we didn't pick any Sophie's Choice tomatoes until July 10th, this is the earliest harvest we've ever had of a tomato this size. Though we didn't reach our goal of harvesting ripe, early season determinate tomatoes before the end of June, we came close enough that I think we can do it in the future, especially if we have better weather for tomatoes in May. All we have to do is make a few simple changes. First, I'll start the determinate tomatoes earlier in the grow room, probably in late February or early March. And we'll transplant them outside early, under cover, to our fire ring raised beds in the sunny front yard garden. We'll use the fire rings because the plants in those beds are more healthy and producing more fruit than those in grow bags. And the fire rings are easy to cover with hoops and greenhouse plastic. With these simple changes, I'm confident that we'll have even earlier tomato harvests next year. And just to be on the safe side, we'll move our prized tomatoes a little bit further back from the sidewalk. If I have enough time this weekend, I also hope to bring you an update on our front yard garden, where we're growing tomatoes, potatoes, onions, peppers, eggplants, and more. I'll see you then.